Today I have two guys with me who are both very, very smart, and they're both in the AI industry, both developing it and running companies using it. Thomas and Stefan. Can you specify what exactly is an AI agent?
What's an AI agent? So you want to give, like, an agent for me is anything that's like autonomous. Like you can use the technology as a tool. You can prompt ChatGPT to give you an answer, and it would gladly do so, right? And this is like you use it as a tool. But what you can also do is give it more autonomy, have it decide to use you as a tool, to ask questions back, to use different tools in between to get to the final answer, to do this like iteratively and more autonomous, not necessitating the human to put the control flow and decide on its own control flow.
When you say that to use you as a tool, I can imagine many people thinking
human as a tool.
Yeah, exactly, of how AI is taking over, let's say, and becoming an overlord of humans. So what can you say about that? Do you think it is something that happens or could happen? Or
I mean, it's happening already that we already give AI more and more autonomy. I think in the last couple of years it was more, you have like these tools that you use. You don't really like have an idea on what's going on in the background, like all these deep learning models on cancer detection and I don't know what. Yeah. But that was like very narrow in scope, and I think what's happening right now is more and more broad in scope, more and more complex problems that you can solve that necessitate different angles, right? Like all the nuance that humans have when they try to solve a problem. The premise of AI agents is also like to, given the problem, decide itself, like what's the control flow going to look like, right? I first do this, then I do this, then I do this.
So do you think we are chasing after AI to catch up with it, or are we actually leading it forward?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Who is we?
Do you think we are still in the phase where we try to understand how AI works, even from software developers like you, and try to catch up with understanding its potential? Or have we done that and we are actually leading it knowingly?
I mean, it depends on who you mean with we, right? There's plenty of people who barely know about it.
Okay. So you, as software engineers, for example, how do you work with AI? Do you understand exactly how it works? Like, I'm trying to get an idea of it. Okay. Is it programming like the rest of the programming, or is it completely different?
So, I mean, there's a lot of different trends and a lot of different things happening. I think a good question is the topic of understanding. To what extent do we understand it? And as with all other topics, not just AI, there is different levels of understanding something, right? As much as we have different levels of understanding how this podcast here works, how this microphone works. I actually have no clue how microphones work. I mean, I do have some clue of how microphones work, but if you come now with some technical diagrams and ask me like how information is being processed in there, I actually don't have a clue, right? And I think the same is very much true for AI. We have now these reasoning models, O1 from OpenAI, DeepSeek, R1, and equivalent models that do show their reasoning before they generate the response. So if you can see it, there is a certain level of understanding, right? You can follow the reasoning, you can see what things the model thought about, reasoned about in its chain of thought, and came to the conclusion. So there is a certain level of understanding, and I think a really useful one.
I find this very interesting because from my studying in medicine, we know that in neuroscience, when you have a thought like that I want to move my hand upwards, we can actually see the electrical signal being transmitted as activity in the neurons before I actually make the conscious decision of lifting up my hand. So we see activity in the brain of processing what I'm going to do, lifting my hand, before I actually think consciously that now I'm lifting my hand. Do you think that something similar could happen with AI?
I mean, I think that's actually a really good analogy, right? Let's make a couple of comparisons there. Firstly, obviously there has to be first a signal before you lift your hand, because the signal causes your hand to be lifted. now, how well do we understand the signal? From some other signals we looked at, from other people, and from measurements on you, we know that roughly the signal corresponds to you will lift your hand.
Yes.
But how well do we actually understand the signal? Do we know?
Not completely, no.
Not completely. There is, depending on how deep, how fine-grained you want to go, we enter a point where we lose understanding. And with more and more complex model architectures that we are facing in this area of a mixture of expert models or let's not dive too deeply into technical architectures, but the more complex they get, the harder the intricacies of them become to understand. And I think that's for sure a trend that's happening. On the other hand, the high-level understanding, I think, is improving.
Okay. You mentioned a couple of AI models right before, like DeepSeek, ChatGPT, all this stuff. Claude is also another one which is gaining popularity. Which model do you think is best for people to use, and depending on the role they need it for? I remember I was using ChatGPT, and then Thomas and I were speaking, and he suggested that I also try out Claude, and it had pretty good results. But what AI model would somebody like you use, and what AI model would, let's say, a random person need, either for copywriting purposes or research is also a very important one? I have to do a lot of research, for example.
I think first to understand is the AI model landscape is super dynamic. Every month there's new frontier models coming out of AI labs like Anthropic, which releases Claude, OpenAI, which releases ChatGPT. We have AI vendors like DeepSeek from China. There's a lot of different AI
China, as Trump
China
would say, yeah, the secret agents.
Yes. So they all compete for producing better models. And what is a better model is very dependent on what you optimize for.
Okay. How about research, like finding studies and having a concrete background towards something that you're going to speak about?
Clearly OpenAI, deep research at the
OpenAI.
moment. At the moment.
Okay.
For that, we also need to understand those AI models are not research assistants per se. They are also not retrieval systems that can in real time browse the web, etc. They are just trained to use tools. As I already mentioned before, they can choose to now let's do a Google search with this and that parameters. In the end, the Google search provides a certain output, right? The search results. Now the agent receives those in the prompt and can decide now to use the next tool, which is, for example, the web browsing. Click on one of those links. Decide, hey, now I have all the information that I need, or move forward. And this is exactly what's happening with deep research of OpenAI. That's the concept of AI agents in the end.
I'm not sure if I actually agree on this.
How come?
I think this is very much true for GPT-4 type of models, right? Where you have in ChatGPT, or regardless of the model, but ChatGPT implementations of the ChatGPT implementation of GPT-4, where you ask a question and then you can watch the agent of doing a Google search, and then it does some data analysis, writes some Python code, gives you a response. The kind of agentic interface you have in ChatGPT. The deep research agent of OpenAI, I think, is much more than a normal chat model with a couple of tools that it can choose to use.
How come?
The deep research agent of OpenAI, I think we want to differentiate two types of things. Firstly, AI models like GPT-4, O1, Claude and Sonnet, etc., and products built from those. And most of the time we talk about think of this as a spectrum, right? Nobody uses the raw model. In many cases, we have very sophisticated products where the model is only a small part of it. And most of the things we use every day are somewhere on that scale. And what Thomas just described is the normal ChatGPT web interface where you have, or a lot of other AI agents where you give them a task and then they choose to use these tasks.
Okay.
And then there's products like actually Digicast, the product Thomas produces, where you have an extremely sophisticated platform with a lot of very clear and sharp workflows that are defined, where the AI models are only making very small steps and are very strongly guided with lots of guardrails. And the deep research agent of OpenAI is one of such products, right? There's an extremely clear, sharp process of what the agent does, and like how he asks back about your intent, gathers information, which kind of data sources it looks through, how they are being looked through, and this is most of the time, like this is a fixed provided structure to some extent. I mean, we don't know the exact architecture, but there's for sure like a lot of guardrails and structure provided. And I think in that sense, the Deep Research Agent of OpenAI is at the moment the best product to do research, the best product to generate research reports and find the right papers.
Okay. So in the first podcast I ever published, it was with Arijit, who is a guy, a very prominent leading figure in AI, both in terms of software engineering, but also he holds very important positions in healthcare. Very, very famous pharmaceutical company, has a very high position. When I asked him about what is AI, I remember him telling me that's a very complicated question because AI is usually a term that people use when they actually are not very sure what they're talking about. So they use this gray box to just put everything in the same basket, like AI. Do you agree with that?
Is an if statement intelligence?
Yeah. Okay.
I could argue so. I think there's like different levels of intelligence. I think like an array of if statements of like, if this is the case, then do this, is already some form of intelligence. It's like reacting on the environment somehow, right? I think we just like get to more and more sophisticated forms of intelligence. And
in what way sophisticated?
Like if you see what we classified as AI years back, like we had like classical machine learning models trying to just put in a bunch of data, supervised learning, have this classified, and based on like this classified data, find patterns that would allow to like predict new, not yet seen instances, which is again a more sophisticated form of intelligence that like programmed if statements.